The radio crackled with static before the voice cut through like a blade. Blackwater Base, this is SEAL Team Bravo. We are compromised. Repeat, we are compromised. Air cover is down, 6 kilometers northeast of Target Echo. The operations center fell silent except for the hum of computer fans and the distant rumble of generators. Major Rebecca Ghost Thorne stood at the back of the room, her flight suit still damp with sweat from the morning's training run, watching as chaos erupted across multiple screens. Intelligence Officer Captain Martinez leaned forward, his voice tight with disbelief. "Confirm your last, Bravo. Did you say air cover is down?" The response came fragmented through bursts of automatic weapons fire. "Affirmative. Both Warthogs took direct hits from surface-to-air missiles. No parachutes observed. We have enemy armor moving on our position. Need immediate extraction or air support." Colonel Hayes, the base commander, slammed his palm against the tactical display table. The holographic map showed 8 red dots converging on a single blue beacon deep in hostile territory. "What do we have available?" he barked at the duty officer. Lieutenant Chen scrolled frantically through deployment schedules on his tablet. "Sir, next available close air support is 47 minutes out. Closest extraction team is over an hour." The radio erupted again with the distinctive chatter of combat. Contact left, contact left. We've got T-72s moving in from the north." "This is it, Blackwater. Tell our families we—" The transmission dissolved into static. Every person in the room understood what that silence meant. Somewhere in the desert, 8 of America's finest warriors were about to die. Ghost stepped forward from her position against the wall, her boots clicking against the polished concrete floor. "Sir," she said quietly, her voice cutting through the ambient noise with surprising authority. Hayes turned, his expression a mixture of desperation and barely controlled rage. "Thorne, you're grounded pending investigation from yesterday's incident." She met his gaze without flinching. "With respect, sir, that investigation can wait. There's a fully fueled A-10 sitting on the tarmac right now." Hayes shook his head. "Absolutely not. You're flying solo, you have no wingman, and you're under review for insubordination." Ghost's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Around the room, junior officers exchanged glances, remembering whispered conversations about the pilot who'd been stripped of her squadron command for questioning orders. "Colonel," she said, stepping closer to the display showing those 8 blue dots growing fainter by the minute, "those SEALs don't care about my disciplinary record. They need someone who can fly low and shoot straight." The radio hissed again with desperate voices calling for help that wasn't coming. Martinez looked up from his communications console, his face pale. "Sir, we're losing contact with Bravo Team. Signal strength is dropping fast." Hayes stared at the tactical display where enemy armor symbols crept closer to the Americans' position. Every second of hesitation meant death for those men. In the background, maintenance crews could be heard prepping aircraft that wouldn't arrive in time. Ghost stood perfectly still, her green eyes fixed on the colonel, waiting for a decision that would either save 8 lives or end her military career forever. The operations center buzzed with frantic energy as technicians tried desperately to reestablish contact with the SEAL team. Ghost watched the tactical display update in real time, each refresh showing enemy forces tightening their noose around Bravo Team's position. The mathematics were simple and brutal. 8 Americans with limited ammunition facing an entire mechanized infantry company. Without air support, their survival window measured in minutes, not hours. Colonel Hayes ran his hand through graying hair, the weight of command etched in every line on his face. 3 tours in Afghanistan had taught him when situations had crossed from dangerous into hopeless. "Thorne," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper, "you understand that flying solo into that kind of airspace is essentially a suicide mission?" She nodded once, her expression unchanged. "Yes, sir, but it's the only chance they have." Lieutenant Chen looked up from his workstation, voice strained with urgency. "Colonel, I'm reading multiple SAM sites lighting up across the target area. Whatever took out our birds is still active and hunting." The intelligence painted a grim picture. Sophisticated Russian-made surface-to-air missile systems, mobile and deadly accurate. The kind of defensive network that turned A-10 Thunderbolts into falling metal coffins. Hayes had already lost 2 aircraft and 4 crew members. The thought of losing a third made his stomach clench. "Sir," Ghost said, stepping closer to the tactical display, "I've studied every combat report from this sector. The enemy's using a layered defense with early warning radar here, here, and here." She pointed to positions on the holographic map. "But there's a gap in coverage along this ridge line. If I come in from the southwest, staying below 50 feet, I can avoid their primary acquisition radars." Martinez shook his head grimly. "That approach puts you directly over known anti-aircraft artillery positions. AAA that close is just as deadly as missiles." Ghost's fingers traced the proposed flight path on the display. "Maybe, but SEALs don't train to die in some desert hole because their support got scared of ground fire." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Around the room, younger officers watched this exchange between the disgraced pilot and their commanding officer, sensing something more than tactical discussion. Hayes studied her face, seeing something that reminded him of pilots he'd known 20 years ago, the ones who flew when everyone else said it was impossible. The radio crackled to life with weak signal bursts. "Blackwater, Bravo team, ammunition low, heavy casualties." The transmission faded back to static, but everyone had heard enough. Time was running out. Hayes looked at the tactical display one final time, weighing 8 American lives against the career and likely death of one more. "Martinez," he said slowly, "prep Warthog 7 for immediate launch." Ghost's expression remained neutral, but her hands clenched slightly at her sides. "Copy that, sir." As she turned toward the door, Hayes called after her. "Thorne." She stopped, looking back over her shoulder. "Your call sign," he said quietly. "How did you earn it?" For the first time since entering the operations center, she almost smiled. "They said I appeared out of nowhere when people needed me most, sir, then vanished just as quickly." Hayes nodded grimly. "Let's hope that reputation holds true today." The walk from the operations center to the flight line stretched across 200 yards of scorching tarmac, but Ghost covered the distance with purposeful strides. Above, the desert sun blazed mercilessly, creating waves of heat distortion that made the parked aircraft shimmer like mirages. Maintenance crews scattered across the flight line looked up as she passed, their faces reflecting a mixture of curiosity and concern. Word traveled fast on military bases, and everyone knew about the pilot walking toward what most considered a death sentence. Chief Master Sergeant Rodriguez intercepted her 50 yards from Warthog 7, his weathered face creased with worry. "Major, with all due respect, this is insane," he said, falling into step beside her. "That bird's been prepped for a standard training mission, not a combat sortie into hostile airspace." Ghost kept walking, her eyes fixed on the A-10 Thunderbolt sitting ready on the tarmac. The aircraft looked exactly like what it was. A flying tank built around a 30mm cannon, designed to survive in the world's most dangerous skis. "Chief, how long have you been maintaining Warthogs?" she asked, beginning her external inspection of the aircraft. Rodriguez wiped his hands on an oil-stained rag. 18 years, ma'am. Seen them come back from missions that should have killed everyone aboard." He paused, watching her examine the titanium bathtub that protected the cockpit. "But I've also seen what surface-to-air missiles do to aircraft. Seen good pilots who never made it home." Ghost ran her hand along the aircraft's nose, feeling the slight vibrations from the auxiliary power unit. "What's our ordnance load?" Rodriguez consulted his tablet. "Standard training configuration. 500 rounds of 30mm, 2 AGM-65 Mavericks, and a single 500-pound GPS-guided bomb." She nodded, calculating engagement possibilities against enemy armor. It wasn't much, but for a pilot who'd learned to make every shot count, it might be enough. "Major," Rodriguez said quietly, "I heard about what happened with your squadron command." Ghost paused in her inspection, her jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. "Then you know why I can't let those SEALs die out there." The Chief Master Sergeant studied her face, seeing something that reminded him of his own son, determination mixed with barely controlled anger at a system that didn't always reward doing the right thing. He handed her the aircraft logbook, pointing to the maintenance status. "She's mechanically perfect, ma'am. Fresh engines, all systems green." Ghost signed the acceptance forms, officially taking responsibility for the aircraft and its mission. "Chief," she said, climbing the ladder toward the cockpit, "if I don't make it back, make sure someone tells the story properly." Rodriguez snapped to attention and saluted. "Ma'am, you'll tell it yourself when you return." As Ghost settled into the familiar embrace of the A-10's cockpit, muscle memory took control. Hands moved across switches and displays with practiced precision, bringing the aircraft systems online. Outside, ground crews removed safety pins and prepared for engine start. In the distance, she could see other pilots emerging from the operations center, their faces reflecting the same mixture of respect and disbelief that followed legends in the making. The Honeywell turbofans spooled up with their characteristic whine, filling the cockpit with familiar vibrations that felt like coming home. Ghost keyed her radio. "Blackwater Tower, Warthog 7 requesting immediate departure, runway 09. The response came instantly. "Warthog 7, you are cleared for takeoff. Winds light and variable. Good hunting, Ghost." She pushed the throttles forward, feeling 35,000 pounds of combat aircraft accelerate toward an appointment with destiny. The A-10 lifted off with the graceful ugliness that had earned it the nickname Warthog. From her cockpit, Ghost could see the entire base spreading below, rows of parked fighters, administrative buildings, and hundreds of personnel who would spend the next hour wondering if they just witnessed heroism or suicide. She banked southwest, following the flight path she'd traced on the tactical display, knowing that somewhere ahead 8 Americans were counting down their final minutes. As the base disappeared behind her, Ghost switched to the combat frequency where SEAL Team Bravo had last been heard. Static filled her headphones, punctuated by brief bursts of encrypted transmissions too weak to decode. She checked her navigation display. 43 minutes to target area, flying at maximum speed while staying below radar coverage. The desert stretched endlessly ahead, broken only by occasional ridgelines that provided brief moments of concealment from enemy sensors. Her heads-up display showed all systems functioning normally, but Ghost knew that electronic readings meant nothing once the shooting started. She'd seen aircraft with perfect diagnostics disintegrate under enemy fire, and damaged birds with failing systems somehow make it home. In combat, survival depended more on pilot skill and sheer luck than on technology. She adjusted her flight path slightly, following a wadi that carved through the landscape like a natural highway designed for low-level flight. The radio crackled with a transmission so faint she almost missed it. Any station, this is SEAL Team Bravo. We are in contact with heavy armor. Immediate air support required." Ghost keyed her microphone. "Bravo Team, this is Warthog 7. I am 40 minutes out. Hold your position and mark your location with infrared strobes." The response came through bursts of static and weapons fire. "Warthog 7, confirm you said 40 minutes. Our air cover was destroyed over an hour ago." "Bravo Team, I am solo inbound with full ordnance. Repeat, solo bird with Mavericks and 30 Mike. Can you give me a target assessment?" The pause before their response told her everything about their situation. When the SEAL team leader finally answered, his voice carried the tight control of a professional warrior facing overwhelming odds. "Warthog 7, we count 12 enemy vehicles including main battle tanks. We are critically low on anti-tank missiles and taking heavy casualties." Ghost checked her fuel status and weapon systems one final time. Mathematics and physics had reduced 8 human lives to a simple equation. Could one pilot in one aircraft accomplish what an entire squadron had been designed to do? The answer would reveal itself in exactly 38 minutes, when she either saved those SEALs or joined them in whatever comes after the bullets stop flying. The landscape below began changing as Ghost approached the target area, shifting from open desert to broken terrain that provided both concealment and danger. Jagged ridgelines rose like prehistoric spines from the earth, creating natural corridors where enemy forces could position anti-aircraft weapons. She descended further, keeping the A-10 barely 50 feet above the ground, using the Warthog's legendary low-altitude handling to thread between obstacles that would challenge most pilots. Her threat warning system remained quiet, indicating she'd successfully avoided enemy radar detection. But Ghost knew that silence was deceptive. Somewhere ahead, sophisticated surface-to-air missile systems waited in ambush, the same weapons that had already claimed 2 American aircraft. She activated her electronic countermeasures, flooding enemy sensors with false signals designed to confuse targeting systems. It might buy her precious seconds when missiles started flying. Warthog 7, Bravo Team, the radio crackled with increasing urgency. Enemy armor is moving to overrun our position. We have wounded who cannot be moved. Ghost could hear the distinctive sound of tank cannon fire in the background, each boom representing another attempt to eliminate the trapped Americans. Bravo Team, I need you to pop smoke on your location and give me compass bearings to enemy positions. The response came immediately. Roger, Warthog 7. Yellow smoke marking our position now. Enemy armor bears northwest, approximately 800 meters from our location. Ghost checked her targeting system, noting that her Maverick missiles were designed to engage from much greater distances. Getting close enough to use her cannon effectively would require flying directly through the enemy's defensive envelope, a maneuver that bordered on suicidal. She crested the final ridgeline before the target area and immediately spotted the yellow smoke rising from a cluster of rocks where the SEALs had taken cover. Beyond their position, dust clouds marked the movement of enemy vehicles advancing across open ground. Ghost's experienced eye counted at least 10 targets, including the distinctive silhouettes of T-72 main battle tanks with their reactive armor gleaming in the harsh sunlight. Bravo Team, Warthog 7 has visual on your position and enemy forces. I am beginning my attack run now. She banked hard left, setting up an approach that would bring her across the enemy formation from their blind side. The A-10's targeting computer began acquiring locks on individual vehicles, priority assigned to the main battle tanks that posed the greatest threat to the trapped SEALs. As she rolled into her attack dive, Ghost felt the familiar calm that settled over combat pilots in the moments before engagement. Training took precedence over fear. Muscle memory guided her hands across controls, and 20 years of flying experience compressed into pure instinct. The enemy vehicles grew larger in her heads-up display as she closed distance, their crews probably unaware that death approached from above at 400 miles per hour. She fired her first Maverick missile at maximum range, watching the weapon streak toward the lead T-72 with its characteristic white smoke trail. The missile's infrared seeker locked onto the tank's heat signature, guiding the 65-pound warhead toward its target with mechanical precision. Ghost was already selecting her second target when the first missile impacted, transforming the enemy tank into a pillar of flame and smoke. The remaining enemy forces reacted instantly, their formation scattering as commanders realized they were under air attack. Anti-aircraft guns swiveled skyward, searching for the threat that had just eliminated their lead vehicle. Ghost rolled inverted and pulled into a steep dive, bringing her cannon to bear on a cluster of armored personnel carriers that were positioning to assault the SEAL team's defensive position. The GAU-8 Avenger cannon beneath her feet erupted with its distinctive growl, sending streams of 30mm depleted uranium rounds toward the enemy vehicles at a rate of nearly 4,000 rounds per minute. Each projectile carried enough kinetic energy to penetrate tank armor, and Ghost watched with professional satisfaction as her rounds found their marks. 2 personnel carriers exploded in rapid succession, their ammunition stores detonating in spectacular secondary explosions that sent debris hundreds of feet into the air. But her attack had revealed her position to every enemy weapon system in the area. As Ghost pulled out of her dive and began a high-speed escape maneuver, the sky around her erupted with anti-aircraft fire. Tracer rounds streaked past her cockpit like deadly fireflies, while larger caliber rounds exploded in black puffs of shrapnel that rattled against her aircraft's armored skin. Her threat warning system screamed to life as multiple surface-to-air missile sites achieved lock-on. Ghost threw the A-10 into a series of violent evasive maneuvers, using every trick learned through 2 decades of combat flying. She dispensed chaff and flares while diving toward the deck, hopping to break enemy target locks before missiles could be fired. Behind her, the sky filled with smoke trails as her attack had awakened a hornet's nest of defensive systems. Warthog 7, that was beautiful. The SEAL team leader's voice carried new hope despite the continuing sound of weapons fire. You got their lead tanks, but they're still advancing on our position. Ghost checked her remaining ordnance. 1 Maverick missile, 1 500-pound bomb, and approximately 300 rounds of cannon ammunition. Against 10 remaining enemy vehicles, it would have to be enough. She swung wide to set up for another attack run, staying low to avoid the searching beams of enemy radar systems. The mathematics were simple. She needed to eliminate or neutralize enough vehicles to break the enemy's assault before her ammunition ran out. If she failed, those 8 SEALs would die, and she'd likely join them when her fuel ran low or enemy missiles found their mark. As Ghost lined up for her second pass, she realized that somewhere in the chaos of combat, something had shifted. The voices on the radio no longer carried undertones of skepticism about the disgraced pilot flying solo. Instead, she heard the recognition that legends earn in moments when everything depends on a single person's courage and skill. The second attack run came from the opposite direction, exploiting the confusion created by her initial assault. Enemy forces were repositioning to defend against another attack from the same vector, leaving their eastern flank temporarily exposed. Ghost approached at nearly 0 altitude, using a dry riverbed to mask her approach until the last possible moment. The surviving enemy commander was skilled, but he'd made the fundamental error of assuming his opponent would repeat previous tactics. She popped up from the riverbed with the enemy formation spread before her like targets on a training range. Her remaining Maverick missile locked onto another T-72, while Ghost simultaneously lined up cannon shots on supporting vehicles. The Maverick streaked away just as anti-aircraft fire began filling the air around her position. The missile's impact eliminated the second main battle tank, but Ghost was already diving toward the remaining vehicles with her cannon spinning up to firing speed. The GAU-8 cannon hammered enemy positions with devastating accuracy, each burst carefully aimed to maximize damage against specific vehicle types. Ghost's experience fighting armor showed in her target selection. First the command vehicles with their distinctive antenna arrays, then anti-aircraft guns that posed direct threats to her aircraft. Finally, the personnel carriers that would deliver infantry to assault the SEAL team's position. Her tactical display showed 3 more enemy vehicles destroyed or disabled, but the remaining forces had finally organized an effective defense. As Ghost pulled out of her attack dive, a wall of anti-aircraft fire rose to meet her. Tracer rounds filled the sky with geometric patterns of death, while proximity-fused shells exploded close enough to shake her aircraft with their concussion waves. Missile launch! Ghost's threat warning system screamed the electronic warning while simultaneously displaying the location of the surface-to-air missile site. She had perhaps 3 seconds to react before a Soviet-made SA-8 missile reached her aircraft. Training took control. She rolled inverted, dispensed chaff and flares, then pulled into a crushing dive that pushed the A-10's structural limits while staying ahead of the incoming weapon. The missile detonated close enough to pepper her aircraft's tail section with shrapnel, but the Warthog's legendary durability absorbed the damage without critical system failures. Ghost's engine instruments showed slight irregularities, indicating possible damage to her left turbofan, but both engines continued producing power. She leveled off at minimum altitude and checked her remaining ammunition, approximately 100 rounds of 30mm and 1 GPS-guided bomb. "Bravo team, Warthog 7, she called while setting up for what might be her final attack run. Give me coordinates for the largest concentration of enemy vehicles. The SEAL team leader's response came through heavy static. Warthog 7, they've pulled back about 600 meters north of our position. Looks like they're regrouping for another assault. Ghost checked her targeting system, realizing that her 500-pound bomb could potentially eliminate multiple vehicles if she could drop it precisely into their formation. She climbed to bombing altitude, knowing that increased elevation made her more vulnerable to surface-to-air missiles, but was necessary for accurate GPS-guided weapons delivery. The bomb bay doors opened with mechanical precision as her targeting computer calculated release parameters. Below, enemy vehicles sat clustered together, their crews probably assuming that a single aircraft had expended its primary weapons and would soon withdraw. Ghost pressed the release button, feeling the aircraft lurch slightly as 500 pounds of high explosive separated from the weapon's pylon. The GPS-guided bomb fell silently toward its target, its guidance system making continuous course corrections during the 40-second flight time. She rolled into a steep dive to escape the blast radius, her aircraft once again threading through anti-aircraft fire that seemed to fill every cubic foot of airspace. The bomb detonated precisely in the center of the enemy formation, its explosion visible as a brilliant flash followed by an expanding sphere of smoke and debris. Secondary explosions indicated that the weapon had found fuel and ammunition stores, multiplying its destructive effect far beyond its design capability. When the smoke cleared, Ghost could see that her attack had eliminated or disabled most of the remaining enemy vehicles. "Holy shit, Warthog 7, that was incredible." The SEAL team leader's voice carried amazement even through the combat frequency's encryption. "Enemy forces are withdrawing. Repeat, enemy forces are breaking contact and withdrawing north." Ghost allowed herself a moment of satisfaction while checking her fuel status. She had enough remaining for perhaps 20 more minutes of flight time, sufficient to provide additional support if needed, but not enough for extended loitering. "Bravo team, this is Warthog 7. I am critically low on fuel and ammunition. Can you confirm all immediate threats have been neutralized?" The response came quickly. "Affirmative, Warthog 7. Enemy armor has withdrawn beyond effective range. We have casualties requiring medical evacuation, but we are no longer in immediate danger of being overrun." Ghost felt tension she hadn't realized she was carrying begin to drain from her shoulders. As she turned southwest toward home, Ghost keyed her radio one final time. "Bravo team, extraction assets should be inbound to your position within 30 minutes. Stay alert and keep your heads down." The SEAL team leader's final transmission followed her as she departed the target area. "Warthog 7, I don't know who you are, but you saved 8 American lives today. We won't forget." The return flight passed in relative silence, broken only by routine navigation calls and periodic system checks. Ghost's left engine showed increasing irregularities, forcing her to reduce power and extend her flight time, but the venerable A-10 continued flying with the stubborn reliability that had made it legendary among ground forces worldwide. As the base came into view, she could see emergency vehicles positioned along the runway, standard procedure for aircraft returning from combat with possible battle damage. Her landing approach felt different somehow, as if the weight of what she'd accomplished was settling into her consciousness for the first time. The A-10 touched down with barely a vibration, rolling out normally despite the shrapnel damage to its tail section. As Ghost taxied toward the parking area, she could see ground crews and other pilots gathering near her assigned spot, an unusual crowd for a routine aircraft recovery. She shut down the engines and began the post-flight checklist, her movements automatic after years of repetition. Outside, Chief Master Sergeant Rodriguez approached with his maintenance team, already beginning their assessment of battle damage. Ghost removed her helmet and oxygen mask, suddenly feeling the exhaustion that adrenaline had held at bay during the mission. Colonel Hayes waited at the bottom of the aircraft's ladder as she climbed down, his expression unreadable in the harsh afternoon sunlight. "Major Thorne," he said formally, "I need a complete mission debriefing as soon as possible." Ghost nodded, expecting the standard post-combat procedures. "Yes, sir. Give me 10 minutes to complete the aircraft logbook entries." As she turned toward the maintenance stand, Hayes called her name again. When she looked back, she saw something different in his expression, respect mixed with what might have been surprise. "Major," he said quietly, "SEAL Team Bravo sent a preliminary report. They estimate you eliminated 12 enemy vehicles and saved 8 American lives." Ghost met his gaze without expression. "I was just doing my job, sir." Hayes studied her face for a long moment. "No, Major. You were doing something far more important than that." As he walked away toward the operations center, Ghost realized that something fundamental had changed in the hour since she'd taken off on what everyone assumed would be a suicide mission. The whispers and sideways glances that had followed her since the disciplinary action were gone, replaced by something she hadn't experienced in months: genuine respect from fellow warriors who understood what she'd accomplished. The debriefing session stretched for over 2 hours as intelligence officers extracted every detail from Ghost's mission report. They wanted precise coordinates of enemy positions, accurate counts of vehicles destroyed, and technical assessments of enemy defensive capabilities. Ghost answered their questions with professional precision, but her mind kept returning to the radio transmissions from SEAL Team Bravo, 8 voices that would continue speaking, because she'd been willing to fly when everyone else said it was impossible. Major Patricia Viper Kowalski, the squadron's current commander and Ghost's former second-in-command, entered the briefing room as the session concluded. The two women had served together for 3 years before Ghost's command authority was stripped away following her public disagreement with a general's tactical decisions. Their relationship remained professionally cordial, but personally complicated by the circumstances that had led to Viper's promotion. "Rebecca," Viper said, using her first name in a way that indicated this conversation was personal rather than official, "I heard what you did out there today." Ghost finished signing her mission report and looked up, meeting her former subordinate's eyes. "I responded to a tactical emergency, Pat. Nothing more than what any pilot would have done." Viper shook her head slowly. "No, that's not true. Half the pilots on this base wouldn't have taken that mission. The other half wouldn't have survived it." They walked together toward the squadron-ready room, where other pilots were already gathering for the evening briefing. Ghost could feel their eyes following her progress, but the attention felt different now. Instead of the mixture of sympathy and embarrassment that had followed her demotion, she sensed something approaching admiration. Combat success had a way of reshaping reputations, especially when that success involved saving American lives against overwhelming odds. "Rebecca," Viper continued as they paused outside the ready room, "there's going to be an investigation into today's mission. Washington wants to understand how one pilot accomplished what a full squadron was supposed to do." Ghost's expression hardened slightly. "Are you saying I did something wrong?" Viper raised her hands in a peaceful gesture. "Just the opposite. I'm saying you did something that's going to change how people think about close air support doctrine." Inside the ready room, conversations quieted as Ghost entered. Pilots who'd barely acknowledged her existence for the past 4 months now watched her with undisguised curiosity. She took a seat in the back row, the same position she'd occupied since her demotion, but somehow it felt less like exile and more like a vantage point from which to observe the squadron she'd once commanded. Captain Jennifer Shark Williams, one of the younger pilots, turned in her seat to face Ghost directly. "Ma'am, is it true you took out 12 enemy vehicles in a single pass?" Ghost shook her head. 3 passes, and it was team effort with the SEALs providing target information." Shark's eyes widened with genuine amazement. "Still, ma'am, that's incredible. I've never heard of a solo A-10 engaging that many targets and surviving." Lieutenant Colonel Harrison, the wing operations officer, called the room to attention as he entered with a stack of classified folders. "Gentlemen and ladies, today's briefing will focus primarily on Major Thorne's successful rescue mission and its implications for future close air support operations." Ghost felt every eye in the room turn toward her, but for the first time in months, the attention didn't feel like a burden. Harrison activated the wall display, showing a tactical map of the morning's engagement area. At approximately 1340 hours, Major Thorne single-handedly engaged and destroyed 12 enemy vehicles, including 4 main battle tanks, while operating without wingman support in heavily defended airspace. He clicked to the next slide, showing gun camera footage from Ghost's attack runs. This mission represents one of the most successful close air support operations in recent history. As the briefing continued, Ghost found herself studying the faces of pilots she'd trained and commanded for years. In their expressions, she saw the recognition that today's mission would become part of Squadron legend, the kind of story that gets told to new pilots as an example of what's possible when skill, courage, and desperation combine in perfect proportion. The transformation in how her fellow pilots regarded Ghost became evident during the informal discussions that followed the official briefing. Conversations that had excluded her for months now actively sought her input, with pilots asking technical questions about low-altitude tactics and single aircraft engagement procedures. The disciplinary action that had made her a squadron pariah was suddenly overshadowed by combat success that none of them could deny or diminish. Captain Torch Martinez, the squadron's weapons officer, approached her with a tactical question that would have been unthinkable the day before. "Major, how did you manage target acquisition against multiple vehicles while avoiding surface-to-air missiles?" Ghost considered the question seriously, recognizing that these younger pilots genuinely wanted to learn from her experience. "It comes down to situational awareness and energy management," she replied. "You have to think 3 moves ahead, like chess but with missiles." Lieutenant Cowboy Thompson, fresh from flight school and eager to prove himself, leaned forward intently. "Ma'am, what was going through your mind when you realized you were facing that many enemy vehicles alone?" Ghost paused, remembering the moment when her targeting computer had counted 12 red symbols against a single blue dot representing her aircraft. "Honestly, I was thinking about 8 Americans who needed someone to care more about their lives than their own safety." The ready room had grown quiet, with every pilot listening to an impromptu lesson from someone who just demonstrated what their training was ultimately designed to produce: a warrior capable of accomplishing the impossible when lives depended on it. Ghost realized that she was no longer the cautionary tale of what happens when officers challenge authority, but rather proof that sometimes the system needs people willing to do what's right regardless of consequences. "Major," said Captain Razor Kim, the squadron's most experienced pilot after Ghost herself, "there's something I need to say." The room's attention focused on Kim, who'd served 2 tours in Afghanistan and earned respect for his tactical expertise. "4 months ago, when you challenged General Morrison's tactics in that planning meeting, most of us thought you were committing career suicide." Ghost met his gaze steadily, remembering the uncomfortable silence that had followed her public disagreement with the general's strategy. Kim continued, his voice carrying the weight of hard-earned wisdom. "Today proved that you were right about close air support doctrine. One pilot with the freedom to adapt tactics saved more lives than a full squadron following rigid procedures." Around the room, other pilots nodded in agreement, finally understanding that Ghost's insubordination had been based on tactical expertise rather than personal ambition. The revelation that her disciplinary action might have been unjustified created a complex emotional atmosphere in the ready room. These pilots had watched a respected leader fall from grace, then witnessed her redemption through combat excellence. The cognitive dissonance of seeing someone prove their critics wrong in such dramatic fashion was forcing them to reconsider everything they thought they knew about military hierarchy and the relationship between following orders and saving lives. "There's something else," said Major Viper Kowalski, standing near the tactical display. "I received a call from Pentagon personnel 30 minutes ago. They want Major Thorne in Washington next week for a tactical assessment briefing." Ghost felt her stomach tighten, knowing that Pentagon attention could lead either to vindication or further scrutiny of her methods. "Did they specify what kind of assessment?" Viper shook her head. Just that senior leadership wants to understand how today's mission succeeded where conventional tactics failed. The implications hung in the air like smoke from Ghost's gun camera footage. If the Pentagon concluded that her success resulted from superior tactical thinking, it would vindicate her earlier challenges to established doctrine. If they decided she'd simply been lucky, it might reinforce the system that had punished her for speaking truth to power. As the informal discussion continued, Ghost realized that today's mission had created a fulcrum moment not just for her career, but potentially for how the Air Force approached close air support operations. 8 saved lives had become a catalyst for examining whether rigid adherence to protocol sometimes prevented the flexibility necessary for mission success. The evening meal in the officers' club revealed the full extent of how dramatically Ghost's status had changed in a single day. Tables that had been closed to her since her disciplinary action now welcomed her presence, with pilots eager to hear first-hand accounts of the morning's mission. The isolation that had defined her existence for 4 months evaporated as if it had never existed. Colonel Hayes approached her table midway through dinner, his expression mixing official business with personal respect. "Major, I wanted to inform you that your disciplinary review has been suspended pending completion of the Pentagon assessment." Ghost set down her fork, understanding that this represented more than administrative procedure. "Sir, does that mean I'm being considered for reinstatement?" Hayes smiled slightly. "Let's just say that saving 8 American lives tends to put previous concerns in different perspective." As Hayes moved on to other tables, Ghost found herself surrounded by pilots who'd served under her command before the disciplinary action. Their questions focused not on today's tactical details, but on broader issues of leadership and decision-making under pressure. She realized they were seeking guidance from someone who demonstrated that doing the right thing sometimes required accepting significant personal risk. "Major," said Captain Williams, "how did you know that challenging General Morrison was worth destroying your career?" Ghost considered the question carefully, aware that her answer might influence how these younger officers approached similar situations in their own careers. "I didn't know it would destroy anything, Shark. I just knew that following his plan would get people killed unnecessarily." The conversation that followed explored themes that military academies teach, but that real-world experience validates. The difference between following orders and exercising judgment, the responsibility of expertise to speak truth regardless of rank, and the sometimes contradictory demands of military hierarchy and mission effectiveness. Ghost found herself articulating principles she'd lived by but never fully examined until forced to defend them. Lieutenant Thompson raised a question,